The first few episodes did a great job of tearing down Nick Fury and making him look sad and pathetic. This one is going to double down and make it even worse. We're also going to be subjected to some of the worst writing tropes imaginable, brought to us by writers who have absolutely no idea what they're doing. Combine this with extremely unrealistic plot contrivances, and it's no wonder this show has such a low viewership. Secret Invasion is bad. Episode 3. We begin with a monologue by Gravik explaining his evil plan to make Super Skrulls. Once the major chaos begins, Earth's heroes, namely the Avengers, will respond to the Skrulls, and the Skrulls will need superpowers in order to fight back. This does make some amount of sense, except the writers and Gravik seem to have completely forgotten that the Skrulls already have what would be considered superpowers. If you recall, in the Captain America Civil War movie, the big threat was the Super Soldier Serum that would give some soldiers an enhanced strength, speed, and endurance. This was considered a major problem for the entire world because even a few of these super soldiers would be a serious threat. Then later on in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series, because the writers don't have any talent and can't come up with anything original, they redid this same plot, and a new group of people had Super Soldier Serum, a different kind, but basically it was the same thing, and once again this was treated as if it was a colossal global threat. And now in the Secret Invasion series, we've already seen that Skrulls are just as powerful as any human using the Super Soldier Serum. In fact, the Skrulls are probably stronger. And we also know that there are 1 million Skrulls on Earth.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Granted, not all of them are going to want to fight, but the fact still remains that the Skrulls themselves are already a super-powered army, and if only a few people with the Super Soldier Serum are considered a global threat, then what would 1 million Skrulls be considered? I'm guessing the writers, again, they must have just forgot about all of this.
Congratulations. You're a failure.
After the intro, we get another flashback, this time to 1998. We learn that Nick Fury's wife has been working for him for a long time. They make some jokes about how they weren't supposed to date because they were working together or something. Nobody cares. It's a bunch of dumb stuff. The more important thing here is that Nick Fury entered a coffee shop, and there's a bunch of other people that are currently working or drinking coffee in that shop. And when he's meeting with this woman who is a secret contact, they're talking about super secret spy stuff in front of everybody, and they're talking kind of loudly, and it was very clear that everybody else that was there would be able to hear them. And again, I have to remind you that Nick Fury is supposed to be the world's greatest spy, and once more, he doesn't act like it at all.
You cadets did some sloppy work, some damn sloppy work.
Moving back to the present, we're treated to some thinly veiled racist woke garbage in the form of a right-wing pundit who is a white guy, which is actually one of the Skrulls that's working with Gravik, but he's saying some crazy stuff like, make sure you have enough food and ammo because World War III might be around the corner. Then the wife walks by and says, "Why are you listening to this poison?" And Nick Fury responds by saying, "Even a broken clock is right twice a day." Now, this whole thing is a blatant and, quite frankly, lazy attempt by the writers to paint people on the right as crazy delusional preppers. But let's think about this in the context of the MCU Earth. What have they been going through? Well, first of all, half of the life on the Earth was completely wiped away, and they're still trying to recover from that. You had an alien army that attacked New York. You have a giant alien celestial thing that's sticking half out of the ocean. There have been numerous superpowered beings and whatnot that have been attacking and blowing up stuff. There was an entire city that got dropped. I can't remember it was the Age of Ultron city. It got dropped and huge amounts of people were taken out and like all kinds of problems throughout the entire world. And yet, you're trying to paint people who want to have a little bit of a stockpile of food or some other requirements and necessities. That type of person is crazy in the MCU world. Like, are you kidding me? Like, have you not seen what's been happening for the last 10 or 15 years on the MCU Earth? Like, where have you been?
This is making insanely good sense to me.
Regardless, now we find out that in addition to being sad and pathetic, Nick Fury is also a complete scumbag, because after the events of Endgame, where everyone was brought back, evidently Nick Fury never went back home to see his wife. He just kind of did other stuff, apparently.
Good attitude. You are still an absolute scumbag, though.
So this is the first time that he's gone back home to see his wife, which doesn't really make any sense. Even if he had become disillusioned after the events of Endgame, the moment he came back from the snap, one of the first things that he would have been trying to do is to make sure that his wife was okay. At least at that point in time, he would still be behaving like Nick Fury, and not the sad sack of shit that we currently have on screen. But no, apparently he's just a scumbag.
I wonder if you're the worst person I've ever met.
In the next scene, Gravik is explaining to Danny that part of their plan has been revealed early that the police somehow found out. There were only a few people that actually knew about it, but then out of the blue, Danny claims that it must have been Brogan, the guy who had been captured in the previous episode. He must have been the one that gave out the information. But Gravik says that was impossible because Brogan never knew about it, so it couldn't have been him. Danny then says, well, he must have just made an educated guess while he was being interrogated. And Gravik asks Danny what she would do if she was being interrogated, and then she would just say that she would lie because she's a good liar.
Is he though?
Of course, throughout this entire conversation, Danny has been lying, and it was really, really fucking obvious. Danny is not believable here at all, and anyone with half a brain cell would see that, no, she's obviously lying to Gravik, and Gravik must know about this because, again, it's so obvious that Danny is lying. And to be blunt, a lot of this is just because of Emilia Clarke's performance. I realize that she has a big fan base because of Game of Thrones, but the fact of the matter is that Emilia Clarke is just not a very good actress. She's just not.
Where are my dragons?
Regardless, it's clear that Gravik has suspicions and he's going to test her. They have to go to yet another meeting. This time it's Gravik going to speak with Talos about Danny. On the way, Gravik gives the address and time of something called Neptune of some importance, and he's talking on the phone right next to Danny. It's pretty clear that she can hear everything, and this is very obviously going to turn out to be a test for her. And, you know, I don't know, the writers are supposed to think that we're going to be surprised by it, maybe? I don't know, whatever. When they do arrive at the destination, Danny isn't going into the meeting for whatever reason, even though it's actually about her. That's the topic they're discussing. But it does give her the opportunity to send a text to someone with the information about the phone call. And again, it's obvious that this is a test. So either Danny is extremely stupid for falling for it, or the writers are extremely stupid for making this obvious trope and thinking anybody's going to believe it.
That's not an opinion, it's a fact.
But enough about that. We have to get back to the things that are really important, like the show having another fucking meeting.
Frankly, I don't find any of this interesting.
As I said, this meeting is supposed to be about Danny, but Gravik and Talos start talking about a bunch of other random stuff for about 5 minutes before they ever even bothered to get around to the topic of Danny. Gravik makes a threat about killing her, and Talos instantly responds by lunging at Gravik. Then we see the entire room is actually full of Skrulls. They all stand up and take the shape of Gravik. However, this is pretty much meaningless because moments later, Gravik again attempts to threaten harm on Danny, and Talos stabs him through the hand with a knife. All of the other Skrulls once again stand up, but this time they don't change forms, and they don't even make a move on Talos. They just kind of stand there looking confused and dumbfounded. So are we supposed to think that the rest of the Skrulls in the room were an actual threat, or not? Or what's going on here? I mean, this is just stupid. It's nonsense.
I hate this. It is revolting.
After Talos leaves, we see Gravik's hand begin to instantly heal. It should be pointed out that this is not something that Skrulls are normally able to do. This is actually the Extremis formula that we saw in the Iron Man 3 movie being used by the movie's villain, Aldrich Killian. I know most of you probably forgot about that because Iron Man 2 and 3 were kind of dumb and forgettable, but this is actually the formula, and now Gravik seems to have access to it. Later on, Nick Fury meets up with Talos and says he has information about a Skrull who is high up in the US government, and Talos reluctantly agrees to help him. He also says that he was handed off intel by Danny, who used a burner phone, and there's some dialogue between these two implying that Danny was some kind of incredibly smart and brave person, even though using that phone was probably one of the most basic things that a person could do as a secret agent or an informant. It seems to be a fairly common occurrence that Disney writers, whether it's the MCU or Star Wars or something else, they will often include things in their show or their movie so that the writers themselves will be perceived as incredibly knowledgeable about whatever happened to topic, right? It's, oh, wow, I can't believe they're using this. Like, that's incredible. But in reality, it's just basic stuff. And rather than coming across as being highly intelligent, the writers just make themselves look like narcissistic assholes when they try to pull this stunt. But don't worry, it gets worse. As the two are driving, Nick Fury makes a comment about how much he's helped the Skrulls since they arrived on Earth, and then Talos spins it around. We learn that the only reason why Nick Fury had been able to get so many promotions within S.H.I.E.L.D. and be so successful was because of his super secret team of Skrulls who were infiltrating different governments and organizations and then feeding him all of that information, which made Nick Fury look like he was incredibly adept and smart and capable, kind of like what the writers want you to think that they are. It's kind of the same thing, but we find out that Nick Fury is essentially a phony.
Why would you keep that a secret? Are you ashamed of recognizing how pathetic your life is?
It's further revealed that every single significant thing that Nick Fury has done was a result of him using those Skrulls. In other words, Nick Fury is not the world's greatest super spy. He's actually just kind of average, and all of his success rightfully belongs to others. With this new information, we now know that Nick Fury is not just a sad and pathetic loser in this show, but he has now been retconned so that he has always been a sad and pathetic, undeserving loser who never should have been put in charge of anything. Regardless, they arrive at the house of a guy named Bob, who apparently has something to do with Neptune, which turns out to be a British submarine. They get into the house by killing all the guards who turn out to be Skrulls, and then we see that the British submarine in question has just received orders to launch missiles against a flight carrying ambassadors for the UN or something to that effect. We learn that the only person who can stop the attack is Bob, and he must use a specific code word, which means that Talos can't just shapeshift into him, pretend to be Bob, and shut down the attack. Now, I don't know why the writers thought that any of this would actually work with a submarine commander who has verified orders from a higher command. This is not how it works. This is nonsensical garbage. Regardless, Talos gets angry at Bob because Bob said something about Danny, and Talos just kills him.
I started blasting. Bah! Bah!
But don't worry, it gets worse. Talos then calls Danny and says that he needs the emergency code word for Bob. So Danny heads down to the secret part of the base. She easily takes out the security guards that are twice her size because fucking of course. Then she goes into the room with all the humans that are in stasis chambers and uses the memory viewing television thing in order to scroll through all of real Bob's memories. I can only imagine how many millions upon millions of memories would be contained in this thing. The ability to find one specific code word seems a bit ridiculous.
What? No.
However, this goes back to something that I mentioned about the first episode. There is no legitimate reason for the Skrulls to keep these humans alive. It only creates opportunities for things to go bad, like what we're seeing in this exact situation. Because if a Skrull pretending to be one of these humans is found out and the cover gets blown, it's not like the Skrulls can just send in another copy and try to pretend and take the place again. That's not going to work. Once the cover is blown the first time, you're done. That's it. So why even keep the humans around? It's not like you need them for anything else. This is just dumb. Regardless, Danny never finds the actual code word as she's searching through these memories. She just constantly keeps seeing images of Bob's kid, and she merely assumes that Bob's son's name would be the code word. She then calls up Talos, who apparently is able to then just call the submarine on a phone, and he gives the abort command with the code word Zachary, which apparently was correct. It certainly is possible to communicate with the submarine, but you would need to have all sorts of secure connections. It's not like Talos can just pick up a phone and dial a fucking number. That's stupid.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
However, even after the abort command is given, one of the sailors attempts to fire the missile anyway. This guy is very obviously a Skrull. However, nothing happens to him, and we never see this character ever again for the entire rest of the series.
Danny kind of forgot it.
Danny is now trying to escape the Skrull facility, but is stopped as she's driving down the road. she's met with Gravik, who explains that he doesn't really care about the submarine situation, he was more concerned about finding the traitor. Once more, I have to point out that his plan was really fucking obvious to everyone except Danny, apparently. Danny then starts making a speech about how if Gravik really wants to be a leader of the Skrulls, then he needs to do such and such, but she doesn't get to finish because Gravik just shoots her.
Nice.
Now that's what I call an epic gamer moment.
On behalf of everyone, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to Gravik for sparing us from having to listen to another weirdo feminist lecture. Thank you very much. After that, Gravik gets in his car, drives away, and leaves Danny lying in the road. Now, she was shot in the chest, so it certainly seems like she's dead. Spoiler, she's not. We'll get into that later. Next, we see Nick Fury's wife leaving the house and going to a bank where she gets access to a safe deposit box. Inside is a gun and an envelope. This is not her gun, however, as she's a little surprised to see it. We'll get more into that dumb situation in the next episode. Oh yeah, and at this point it's also revealed that Nick Fury's wife is working with Gravik, something that was pretty easy to figure out about 30 minutes ago when it was heavily hinted at when Nick Fury and his wife were having a conversation. But I mean, again, the writers keep trying to throw in these things as if it's going to be a surprise to the audience when, I mean, it's really fucking obvious. It's kind of hard to imagine that somehow they managed to make Nick Fury even worse than what we saw in the first 2 episodes. He is such a sad and pathetic shell of a man, there really isn't any way for him to come back from this. Even if he went full-on superhero mode for the last couple episodes, it's not going to wipe away the stain that he has just gone through. But thankfully, that's the end of episode 3.
Taking shots at the enemy, I'm gonna make it to the top, leave a legacy. If I got something to say, you better let me speak. Turn it up a new degree, bitch, you ain't seen anything. I pop off with the new rock, electron